Hey, welcome to Q&A, where you ask your questions on faith and life, and I do my best to give a biblical perspective. Well, we are going to jump into a great question. What can we do when people are deconstructing their faith? The reality is that whether you're familiar with this term or not, many people in the church are deconstructing their faith. If you're not familiar with it, I wouldn't get bent out of shape. It's a term that's used widely depending upon where people are at and what they're pushing back against, if I'm honest. It means different things to different people. One size doesn't fit all. But broadly speaking, it's deconstructing faith is about dismantling one's accepted view of Christianity and what it means to be Christian, evangelical Christian, in order to separate out what are cultural expressions and therefore we don't need to buy into, versus what does the Bible really say? What did Jesus really say? What do the scriptures really say? And that's a messy process, because the interpretive work of understanding scripture is never done alone. It's done in community. It's done from one generation to the next. And so to try and deconstruct by separating out what you've received in order to try and recover some sort of historic Christianity is ironic, because all you're doing is substituting one culture for another, because you can't do theology, you can't engage with scripture outside of a social cultural context. And that's why for most people, deconstruction really has to do with this idea of reworking doctrine in order to better fit a society that no longer resembles the society of the New Testament or the society of the early church, the Middle Ages, even into the early 20th century. So what they're doing is they are seeking to redefine faith in order to better fit, as they see it, the modern world. So really, it's that's what it's about. I read a book once, When Everything Catches Fire. I can't remember who it was written by, but really he talks about deconstruction in terms of a crisis of faith that leads people to either reevaluate and redefine, or else to abandon Christianity altogether. Now, you asked what can we do when people are deconstructing their faith. I'm a big advocate of always starting with relationship. And so when people are deconstructing their faith, I want to start by simply asking why. Not as a challenging question, but as a question to help me understand where this person's at and what's going on in their world. Because broadly speaking, there's at least three. There's probably way more, but I think there's at least three broad reasons or three broad levers that are pushing people to deconstruct their faith in modern society. Given that this is a modern thing, it's only been around for the last 10 years or so, primarily in America, which because of what's been happening in society, but also politically as well. The first of these broad categories is a declining trust in institutions. And society in general, we see a declining trust in financial, political, even business institutions. We're skeptical, we're suspicious of them because of the scandals, because of the agendas and the hypocrisy that we've seen within those institutions over recent times. And the church has not been immune to that. There's been scandals, there's been hypocrisy, and people are beginning to question and push back against that and say, well, so what is the church? And they begin deconstructing. Another one has to do with the fact that we live in a more connected world. You know, there was a time when the people who weren't Christian, who lived an alternative to an alternative moral framework, who did not or had an alternative religious view, they were very much in the minority, and we tended not to have as much to do with them relationally as we do now. The reality is that both in terms of our social networks, but also in our business and workplaces, we're so much more diverse. We're not as homogeneous as we used to be. So in your workplace, in your social settings, there'll be people who do not share your faith, people who have an alternative moral compass, people who have all sorts of ideas, and you've got to know them as good people, and they are. But then what's happened is that it raises a question, well, how do I hold on to the thought that that these people are separated from God, that they're going to hell because their lifestyle doesn't line up with what someone said in the Bible, or they believe something else. And so there's a crisis of faith. And so people seek to redefine, deconstruct traditional Orthodox Christianity in order to try and hold their friendships and some sort of faith together. The third has to do with this identification of Christianity with conservative politics. We especially saw that in America with the evangelical church, especially being aligned very conservatively politically. And so people have pushed back against that. They said, but I'm a Christian. I don't hold those views. And so they begin to question, well, what sort of Christian am I? What does it mean to be a Christian? And that's what's led to their journey of deconstruction. And so by asking those questions, you get an idea of where they're at so that you can engage. So, for example, if the driver for someone is this whole lack of trust in the church because of what's been happening, I would own that. I would acknowledge it. The church is not perfect, but it's not supposed to be yet. We are on a journey of becoming who Jesus wants us to be. We're not there yet. It doesn't excuse, but it helps understand. And so therefore, we don't sweep things under the carpet. We don't pretend it's okay when it's not. We own it and say, therefore, let's do better. How can we do better? How can we work together to build something better? I would have conversations about how people can be part of the Reformation, part of the solution, rather than leaving altogether. Likewise, if the lever that's driving people has to do with the fact that, I've got friends who are gay, I've got friends who are Muslim, I've got friends who are, and I can't accept that they're going to hell. And therefore, then that's a discipleship issue. It's possible to reconcile friendships with the exclusive nature of an inclusive faith that says, I don't want anybody to perish, but for that to happen, things have to change in people's lives. It's not that we change the absolutes, we change the moral boundaries. It's that because we love these people, we engage with these people. How can we help them on a journey of discovery to discover the grace and the mercy of Christ and his love for them? Because he's not willing for them to die either. He's even less willing than you are. So it's a discipleship issue. The same as, if the driver has to do with faith and politics, that's a discipleship issue. I would have conversations around how, absolutely right, the Bible does say a lot about issues that are near and dear to the left, just as it talks about issues that are near and dear to the right. So to be a Christian doesn't mean to be left or right. To be a Christian means, how do I take that whole spectrum of belief and live out of it consistently and conscientiously? It's quite okay to vote left or right. That's a personal preference. It's an opinion. To be biblical is to say, to measure how do various parties line up and how do they seek to engage with. None of them are going to line up with the scriptures in totality. So, you don't have to identify Christianity with the left or with the right. And again, it's a discipleship issue. So it's a growth issue. So that's why I would start with asking those questions in order to have those types of conversations. So yeah, I hope that gives you some insight and some help, and if that's your question. But hey, if you've got questions on faith and life, jump over to slido.com, use the hashtag askhamish. I'd love to hear from you. But that's it for now. Until next time, God bless.